David Llewellyn, the Dyfed-Powys Police and Crime Commissioner, is calling for the Welsh Government to protect police from the virus as a matter of urgency, and he joins me now. Good morning, David. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Why are police officers at the top of the list? Should it not be teachers so our schools can get back underway?
Oh, thanks for putting me in that situation. I'm married to a teacher, so I'll be careful what I say.
Oh, there we are. You have to be very careful, given the fact you're home as well. You might get a nudge in the shoulders now.
Indeed, and it's not about pitching different professions against one another, but it's just trying to get some sense in relation to what the planning looks like, so that from a policing point of view, that we know when we can sort of reasonably expect that officers and staff that are working within our communities will be vaccinated, because at the moment we don't necessarily have any of that detail. So what I'm calling for is to ensure that policing, because we're working in as a non-devolved agency in Wales with Welsh Government, and most of the other institutions are devolved. It's important that we make sure that the police forces and staff are not forgotten in this priority setting, and that's what I'll be doing. I've got a meeting with Westminster today with the policing minister, and I'll be making that representation to him as well.
So basically what you're saying then, David, is that police officers, they're going into houses at the moment, they're putting themselves in real danger on a daily basis, and therefore they should be protected first.
Yeah, well, alongside a lot, obviously, I think vulnerable people in the community and people working, on the front line in the NHS are obviously at the top of that tier. But within that, then there's some greater complexity. You mentioned teachers, but also police officers and staff who are within our communities on a day-to-day basis, interacting with the public, responding to complex and difficult incidents. And I think they should be given, high priority as well. And that's what I'm calling for.
What are police officers and superintendents and chief constables reporting back to you about the pandemic?
Well, it's been a difficult time, and I think policing across the whole of Wales has really stood up to the test and supported our communities, both in ensuring that regulations are being stuck to as best we can. And I think the public in general in Wales has been very sort of in adherence with the regulations. Not everywhere, obviously, and we've seen the stories of people travelling into the forces to places like Brecon Beacons and North Wales and West Wales, and the police have responded to that. And I think as a result of that response and the proactive work that the police have done during this period, it's only right and proper that they then are put as part of that priority list.
And David, if I may ask you that, you just brought up the fact that people have been travelling over 200 miles to come to our country to walk in our hills, given the fact that you are the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dyfed-Powys Police, and that covers a lot of our beautiful countryside as well. Does it infuriate you when you pick up the newspaper and you see the people have travelled? And many of my callers are looking for people like yourself, David, to clamp down on people who are clearly flouting the rules by coming to some of the most beautiful parts of the country.
Yes, it does. It does frustrate me and infuriate me, as well as infuriating senior and chief officers alike. And what you will see in terms of the issuing of the fixed penalty notices, Dyfed-Powys Police is very top, very much at the top of that pile of the enforcement activity, and we're quite proud of that. We don't want to enforce. As best we can, we try and educate and engage with the public. But at the same time, if people are travelling 200-300 miles to come, to Tenby, which is a beautiful place, and we will welcome people back in the future, now is not the time to do that, and we will be issuing tickets. And we do that with a heavy heart. But what's interesting about the statistics in Dyfed-Powys is that over nearly 60% of our tickets issued are for people from outside of our force area. And I think our local community are very supportive of that activity, and we will continue to do that in support of the community, and always remembering and keeping in mind that we're doing it to reduce the spread of the virus.
And if you can, David, just be clear with me and the listeners here this morning then. You said fixed tickets as well. So what sort of fines are you looking at handing out in Dyfed-Powys? Again, many of my callers have been saying, look, clearly, if people are travelling over 200 miles to come from Middlesex and wherever they're coming from to go to the Brecon Beacons, then they must be quite happy to pay 100 quid, 150 quid. But if it's 1,000, if it's 2,000, if it's 10,000, then suddenly they may change their mind. Would you be looking to increase those fixed penalty notices?
Well, I did call it very sort of onset of the lockdown back in sort of April, May time that perhaps the fines should be increased for those flouting the rules. And in fairness to Welsh Government, they did respond. So there's an escalation now. So if there are repeat offenders, the fine actually doubles. I think it starts at 60. If you pay it within 28 days, it's £30, but then it escalates. It can go to 120, 240, and that keeps rising. And what we've also found is those that have not responded to the fines that they've been given, who have then been summoned through to magistrates' court. What I've been reading in the press and speaking to local justices of pieces in my area is that they are issuing quite heavy fines. So I think there's a bit of a warning there for people that, you know, it will hit you in the pocket if you start flouting the rules. And again, just to remind people that the message is about staying local, staying at home, and working from home where possible, and only travel for essential purposes. And the police are there to support Welsh Government and the health regulations that are in place, purely to try and stop this virus, which is sadly, you know, having such an impact on our communities.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for your honesty today, Dyfed. Diolch yn fawr iawn. That's Dyfed-Powys, Dyfed-Powys Police and Crime Commissioner, calling for the Welsh Government to protect police from the virus as a matter of urgency. But really key there, Mr Llywelyn saying he's infuriated when he reads stories of people travelling over 200 miles to come to Wales to go to the beacons and to areas of our natural beauty.